Okay, today we're going to do a series circuit lab using this equipment. So we've got our resistor coils. We're mostly going to use coils 2, 3, and 4. So coil 2 is 10 meters of 28 gauge copper wire. Coil 3 is 20 meters of 22 gauge copper wire. And coil 4 is 20 meters of 28 gauge copper wire. Remember, gauge numbers are opposite, so 28 gauge is actually thinner than 22 gauge. First, let's review how to make measurements with our voltmeter and our ammeter, and then we'll get started with taking today's lab. And in this lab, we're going to use this as our voltmeter, and it's digital, so we can just read the voltage right off the top of it. For amps, we're going to use this as our ammeter. And this one actually has two scales on it, a 1 amp scale and a 5 amp scale, depending on which one we need on how much current we're drawing through the circuit. So if the wire is going in this one, we're on the 1 amp scale, and we're going to read the top set of numbers. And on the 5 amp scale, the wire is going to be plugged in here, and we're going to read the bottom set of numbers. Now the way the lines work for this one is, if we're on the 1 amp scale, every little line is worth 0.02 amps. So that's going to be 0.02, 0.04, 0.06, 0.08, 0.1, 0.12, etc. So if it goes to this line right here, that means our measurement on the 1 amp scale is going to be 0.52 amps. Now on the 5 amp scale, it's a little bit different. Each line is actually worth 0.1 amp on the 5 amp scale. So if we go to, let's say, this mark right here on the 5 amp scale, that's actually going to be 3.6 amps at that point. All right. Now that we know how to read the scales, we're going to set up the circuit and see what measurements we get. Okay, to start things up, we're going to individually test coils 2, 3, and 4 to determine their resistance using the voltage we put across the coil and the current going through each one. So I'm going to attach these two leads to only measure or only send a current through coil number 2. And after I turn it on, we'll look at the meters and you can measure the current and the voltage for each one. I'm on the 5 amp scale, so we're going to use the bottom set of numbers, and each little line is worth 0.1 amps. So starting with coil number 1, there's our voltage and our current. Turn it off, switching to coil 3 actually. Power back on. The voltage across coil 3 and the current across or through the third coil. Switch back off. Now we're testing coil number 4. Powering on. The voltage across coil 4 and the current. Now that's low enough that I'm going to switch to the 1 amp scale. So I'll power this back off. The volt measurement may also change depending on this power supply, but now on the 1 amp scale we're going to use the top row of numbers with each little line worth 0.02. There's the voltage again, and there's our current measure. Powering things back off again. Now, to do a series circuit, I want to start off with measuring coils 2 and 3 together in series. The way I'm going to do that is I want to take this lead and put it here, and this lead and just move it over one. Now, the current comes out of our DC power supply, goes here, goes through this coil of wire, comes back out, goes through this coil of wire, comes back out. Now it returns to the other side of the DC power supply. So now coils 2 and 3 are in series with each other. I'm going to leave it on the 1 amp scale to start off with, and we'll see how much current we draw. So powering back on. That's the voltage and the current for coils 2 and 3 in series. This is the 1 amp scale. So we're going to use that top row of numbers, and every little line's worth 0.1. Powering off. To get coils 2, 3, and 4 in series, all I have to do is move this lead to here. Now, the current leaves our DC power supply, goes through coil 2, goes through coil 1, and now coil 3, and then back out to the other side of the DC power supply. Again, we're on the 1 amp scale, so it's the top row of numbers. Power back on. Voltage measure. And the current. Okay, powering back off. Now you can use those measurements to figure out the resistance of each coil individually, and then the resistance of coils 2 and 3 in series, and 2, 3, and 4 in series, and compare those answers to what they would have gotten with the total resistance.